serve as the city's planning manager, and I'll convene us this evening. I'm also managing a project for the city to plan for planning efforts in Frog Pond that we're doing this year. And so tonight we're talking about the next great neighborhoods in Frog Pond and having a conversation about what's going on and getting your thoughts around that. So wanted to So we know where we're talking about. I think probably most on this call know, but we're talking east side of the east central part of Wilsonville, on the edge, colored in purple here is where we're talking when we're referring to Frog Pond. And we'll divide Frog Pond up a bit more as we get going here. So tonight's goals is we'll go ahead and do a bit of an introduction. Many of you have been in some prior meetings and have some familiarity, but we want to introduce some key things to the broader community, as well as kind of update on what the Planning Commission and project team and others have been working on over the last few months. Planning Commission is already getting in pretty deep and having some great conversations about the project. So we want to get their perspectives and answer some of your questions, and also get an opportunity for you to ask your questions and get some answers. Some of the questions we've tried to anticipate, so we'll give some information about that up front, and then we'll have time to ask questions as well. So the agenda tonight, we'll first do some introductions of the panelists that we have with us, and then we will give you some background, kind of set the stage, answer some questions that we anticipate coming up or that were commonly asked, and then go ahead and have a conversation in a question and answer type format. So with that, let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. I'll go ahead and stop sharing here so we can see the panelists' faces first. So let's start with our planning commissioners, starting with you, Mr. Mesbah.
Kamran Mesbah, I'm on the Planning Commission. Is that enough of an introduction?
That's great. And then maybe Andrew, then Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron Woods, I'm also on the Planning Commission.
And then Andrew Carr, I'm also on the Planning Commission.
And then Ron and Jennifer.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Ron Haberline, Planning Commission member and Wilsonville resident for 10 years.
Jennifer Willard, Planning Commission member and Wilsonville resident for 7 years.
Thanks. We'll go ahead and do city staff that's with us this evening. I introduced myself, I'll do so again. My name is Dan Pauly, city's planning manager, and then Kim and Georgia.
I'm Kim Reibold. I'm the city's senior planner.
Hi, I'm Georgia McAllister, and I'm the city's assistant planner.
Great. And then let's do the consultant team that's on the panel with us, starting with Joe, and then Andrew and Mariana.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Joe Dills. I am the project manager for the consulting team. I'm with Angelo Planning Group.
Good evening. Andrew Parrish, also with Angelo Planning Group.
Good evening. I'm Mariana Valenzuela. I am with Centro Cultural. I'm the director of community partnerships, and I will be providing support to Angelo Planning Group on the community engagement efforts.
And just looking through our attendee list to see if any of our panelists got stuck in our attendee list. I don't see any right now, but others may join later, and we'll try to introduce them the best we can. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. Thank you for those introductions. And want to find out, there's enough attendees that we're not going to go around and introduce everyone that's joined us on this webinar, but did want to find out a bit more about the group that's with us. So I'll launch a poll here in Zoom. And if you could respond using the polls function, either where you live and whether you participated previously in the frog pond planning. If you'd rather, you can also just answer the questions that are up on the slide in the chat function on Zoom. But let me go ahead and launch this poll. And we'll give a moment to respond. Okay, so we have pretty high participation rate. So I'll go ahead and end the poll. If you'd still like to respond and haven't responded in the poll, feel free to put something in the chat. And so are you able to see the poll results? So we have a mix, a lot of folks that live or near Frog Pond. This is their neighborhood. Then some elsewhere, a couple that live elsewhere in Wilsonville, and some others that are interested for other that don't live in Wilsonville. And fairly even split about those that were involved with the previous planning efforts in Frog Pond and those that are new to it. So interesting. Thanks for participating there. I had one other poll we wanted to do, just kind of get more, ask a couple additional questions. So let me go ahead and share that poll. And if you can also go in and a couple questions, additional questions for you. And there's 2 questions here. The first one being more about your personal experience with housing, and the second one about what you're interested in hearing about, so we can better focus on the conversation tonight. Give about another minute.
Hi everybody in Oregon, I'm Jaden in Conflict.
All right, we had got pretty good participation, similar to the last one, so I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So first question about where participants have lived. As about 4/5 have lived in a single family home. Majority have also lived in an apartment at some point. A number have also lived in a row house or a plex. And going back to the college days, also dorms or congregate housing. So kind of see a pattern of different stages of life here. And other, let's see if we got information about that other. I'm curious about that. And then for the team, let's see what some big interest, transportation and traffic, quite a bit of interest there. Type of mix of housing, certainly we'll hit on that. So a lot of interest there. Type of commercial businesses, roughly half. Timing of development, property owners and others in the room are definitely interested in that. And we can talk more about that. Natural area preservation, understandably, is area of interest. So the panelists can kind of make a note of that, a mental note at least. So as we discuss, maybe we can make sure that we're hitting on those. So thanks for participating. So I also see that our attendee list has been pretty steady for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to kind of getting into more of my portion of the presentation, kind of laying some of the groundwork. A lot of you live here, as you said, so many of you know where it is. But just to clarify, it's again the east central part of Villebois. Sorry. Wilsonville. There's three neighborhoods. The west neighborhood, which we often is the portion that's underdeveloped now, and then the east and south neighborhood, which are areas that are currently mostly rural and anticipated for development over the coming decades. And a lot of our focus tonight will be what will be happening in the east and south neighborhoods over the next couple decades. So then the question comes, why are we doing this now? I mean, whenever we're looking at development, the area is within the region's urban growth boundary, and as such is anticipated to develop here in the fairly short term. Wilsonville has, with that, Wilsonville has a strong legacy of creating great places that start with great plans. So we really feel that having a great plan is a foundation for successful neighborhoods. There's a continuing conversation about housing opportunities, especially more equitable housing choices. In the city's equitable housing strategic plan adopted in 2000, there were specific action items related to what can be done in these future growth areas in Frog Pond. This isn't important, I mean, more kind of into the logistics. This is a first step, and to the timing question, this is a first step before the areas can be annexed to the city and developed. And also there's some deadlines anticipated with getting this plan done in a certain time frame after it was added to the urban growth boundary by Metro. That's by the end of 2022. And also there's grant funds available from Metro right now to do this planning work. So it all brings interest, and it's long been on the city's work plan for this time period, and fits in between a lot of other housing efforts and other planning we're doing. So it's a good time to do it. We have funding from partners available, and want to lay the foundation for future success for this area.
Dan, if I could, I'm going to break in with just another quick note for everybody. Thanks to everyone for answering the poll and telling us your area of interest. I want to invite one additional way in which you can participate, and you can do this just using your keyboard while Dan is talking. The Q&A function at the bottom of your screen can be used to submit questions that the team will try and weave into our presentations, and we'll stop periodically. So I'm sure everybody has specific questions that come to mind either as we go or maybe you arrived with them. So by all means, I'm inviting you to type those into the Q&A function, and we will pause periodically and check in on what everybody's been asking. Okay, thanks for that.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. All right, so next I know this will bring back memories for some of you, other of you, it's a good background that we're not starting fresh with planning in Frog Pond. There's been planning going on here for some time. In 2015, the city adopted what we call an area plan for all of Frog Pond, which includes each of the 3 neighborhoods, west, east, and south, which kind of envisioned them all being a coherent, larger neighborhood. This really set out goals and concepts intended for future refinement. Was at a conceptual level, but laid a good foundation. And it's not regulatory per se to define what development has to be, but really as a guide for future planning efforts. Area plans are followed by more detailed and regulatory binding, what we call master plans, which was adopted for Frog Pond West in 2017, and development has been proceeding there. As in 2017, this area was not in what we call the urban growth boundary, so it wasn't eligible to be master planned, and now it is, and we're proceeding with that. So really what then is in, what elements are within such a master plan? It guides things like housing mix, other land uses such as is there a commercial center or other community uses, the location of streets and trails, really establishing both that pedestrian, bicycle for all the transportation network for all modes, laying out where parks and open space are, where other infrastructure, the needs for other infrastructure such as sewer and water pipes, in addition to the transportation infrastructure. Also, an important part that will be a big focus towards the end of this year and over the summer is how to fund the infrastructure, because infrastructure doesn't come cheap. So that are all important elements. We'll, as indicated, and we'll touch on some of these others, but talk quite a bit about housing mix tonight. I do want to mention, as part of the story and kind of what we're doing here, is the regulatory environment. Just mentioned that with a mind to some historic inequities around housing and zoning that created segregation and exclusion, as well as the ongoing housing crisis. Governments at a variety of levels have been pretty active in recent years in additional regulatory activity around housing. And this creates a different regulatory environment or set of rules and requirements than many of the past planning efforts in Wilsonville, and certainly has an impact on kind of what we're looking at for the planning of these areas. So among that, and I'll explain this a bit more, is around housing mix. So to establish a baseline for the discussion, let's talk through the basics of housing types, options, and how they're part of the mix. So it's helpful to really differentiate between what for sure will be part of the mix and why, versus what's potentially part of the mix and subject to upcoming decisions as part of this planning effort. So for sure, there's going to be the option for detached single family. It's generally widely allowed, traditionally built, as well as included and anticipated in the area plan. Middle housing, which I'll explain a bit more precisely what we mean there here in a minute, was anticipated as well in the area plan for this part of Frog Pond, but also new regulations driven by state law and other factors say it needs to be allowed even beyond maybe where it was indicated in the area plan. It needs to be allowed everywhere that detached single family is allowed. Again, it's important to note it cannot be excluded from any portion of the master plan area. Will likely be built more extensively mixed in with detached single family than we've seen in many other areas. And in Wilsonville. With that said, the recently adopted code standards really focus on having middle housing maintain a look and feel similar to single family, and really with an eye to having this variety of housing mix seamlessly in with detached single family. Similarly, ADUs or accessory dwelling units, which I'll define those a bit more in a moment as well, are also under state law required to be allowed anywhere detached single family is allowed. There's potential to be more extensive use of these in Broad Pond, East and South and elsewhere in the city. Currently, there's as of the end of 2021, the city has 17 accessory dwelling units. So certainly there's a potential for greatly increasing that number here. And as part of actually Metro's requirements for the urban growth boundary expansion, wanted us to have a look at how we can encourage more accessory dwelling units in these new growth areas. So a key question under consideration is the extent of apartments or condos or other multifamily. I will highlight why this question is being asked here in a bit. As I will also highlight, this does not mean that this would look like the apartments previously built in the city. So kind of get into some different forms of apartments, condos, and what that might mean for the discussion here. So briefly, what is middle housing? It's a range of smaller attached or clustered housing types, typically built at a similar scale as single family. It's oftentimes called missing, because it's been missing from a lot of neighborhoods post-World War II. Specifically under city code and state law, we're talking duplex, which is 2 attached units on a lot, triplex, which is 3, quadplex, which is 4, and then for each of those, there's an equivalent detached version where you have like 2 detached homes on a single lot, for example. We're also talking townhouses, which is a type that's fairly familiar in Wilsonville, as well as cottage cluster, which are small detached units clustered around a common courtyard. Accessory dwelling units, a small home of 800 square feet or less, accessory to another home, can either be integrated into the larger structure or detached. And then when we talk about type and scale of apartments and condos, it's helpful to kind of, in my mind, I think about 3 rough categories. I mean, obviously there's kind of more and can be more divided out, but there's garden apartments, which is probably the most common that we think of when we think of apartments in Wilsonville's context. These are large buildings, usually commercially built on fairly large scale around courtyards and parking. This is what a lot of the larger complexes in Wilsonville are like, would fall into this category of garden apartment. Then there's urban or mixed use, similar to what you see built at the Piazza in Bilbois or next to Fred Meyer in Old Town. But there's also small scale, which is essentially slightly smaller than a plex, like a 6 or 5, 6, 7 unit. This is an example built into a single family neighborhood in Eugene, this lower picture. So as you, I bring this up because it's important to kind of think beyond maybe what our brains automatically go to when we hear the word apartment. And so we can really think about what different options may be most appropriate for this new growth area. So why we talk about these different unit types is really a big part of this. This is tied to law as well as just good practice. We're required under state law to do a housing needs analysis, and there's new rules that require cities to also come up with production strategies every few years. So really there's this trend to really focus more on the data and help that make decisions about our zoning and what we're encouraging and kind of what in terms of our underlying regulations and zoning. So this is just an example of one bit of data that was provided in a recent report. They really show, larger lot or similar to what was built through single family built through a lot of Wilsonville's history is is not very attainable economically for a lot of households. And then it shows just kind of different types of construction types and where that might new build would fall, with the X being kind of the average cost and where that, how that relates to median family income, which 100% is around $80,000 for a household. So with that, I'm not going to get a lot into data. If you're interested in more of the data trends, we're going to be talking much more about this in the upcoming Planning Commission work session. But I did want to bring in a couple of my colleagues, Georgia McAllister, our assistant planner, who does the city's annual housing reports, to kind of talk through a few of the short-term housing trends we're seeing and housing need trends, as well as Kim Reibold, our senior planner, who led the city's project management on the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, talk about some of the longer term trends. So, and I believe, go ahead, and Kim may be a bit delayed as I get her back into the panelists. So go ahead, Georgia.
Thanks, Dan. As Dan mentioned, I am Georgia McAllister. I'm the assistant planner, and I have been working on the annual housing report since I started here a few years ago. And as probably most of you know, one of the trends that we're seeing is just growth. The population in Wilsonville is growing really quickly, and the housing is growing along with it. As a result of that, we've seen in the last 7 years that the median income median home value has increased by a little bit over 50%, and the median income has increased by just 28%. So we're already seeing this growing gap between the cost of housing with what our actual income within the city looks like. We can see that playing out in a few other ways, where 70% of households in Wilsonville that earn $50,000 or less a year are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. And that's what we would call cost burdened when they're paying that 30% or more towards their housing. We're also seeing that homes that own the median or that earn the median income within Wilsonville will spend as much as 40% of their income on their housing or mortgage needs during the year, which again is above that 30% affordability marker. And then just on average, the average home in Wilsonville is about 16% more than what someone owning that median income could afford. So already we kind of have this baseline of a discrepancy between what our residents in Wilsonville are earning and what it actually costs to buy and afford a home and live within Wilsonville. So I'd like to hand it over to Kim now, who can talk a little bit more to these topics in the long term.
Thanks, Georgia. I was managing the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, which we adopted in 2020. And one of the initial pieces of work we did with that project was to take a look at some market trends in the area, as well as try to get a better sense of who our future population that we will be serving with this housing will be. So there were a few key higher level trends that came out of that for the long term for the city. The first being that right now, Wilsonville has a fairly young population, particularly the millennial generation is really well represented within the overall population. And so this group, as they age, they're going to continue to seek some relatively affordable options for housing as they get older. Meanwhile, the population over the age of 60 is also expected to remain relatively stable. There is a strong desire for this population to age in place. So they're going to be looking at some smaller, more accessible units close to services. And then lastly, we know that the Latinx community is expanding quickly. The population grew from 2000 to 2016 from 6% to 11% of the population. This is continued to be expected to have more growth, and it is a larger regional trend as well. And we know that there's going to be an interest continuing forward in relatively affordable housing to accommodate multi-generational households. So these trends are important to keep in mind for our planning in the Frog Pond, East and South areas. For one, it speaks to the need for a continued construction of a variety of housing types to really address different ranges of affordability in terms of what different populations can pay for, as well as to accommodate people who have a desire for smaller units, as well as EDUs. And it's also important because we want to be aware of providing services to these populations, and having that in proximity is really important. That we're thinking about the neighborhood commercial center and how the design and function of that center will serve the populations going forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dan.
Thank you, Kim. I'm glad technology worked there. So before I transition to another topic away from housing and data, just wanted to get the opportunity for Joe, Andrew, to add any thoughts that you may have on this topic at this point.
Just a quick one, Dan, on what's been discussed so far. The city, I think, has been looking at its housing needs from two tracks. One is what I would call the more legalistic monitoring of needs. What does the city have to plan for under state law and so on? But then the city has also been looking at it from the point of view of the character of the community and serving kind of the special needs of the population of Wilsonville. And that's more the strategic and equitable housing end of the spectrum. So we're coming into the Frog Pond project kind of with both of those lenses in mind as we look at the issues of housing.
Thank you, Joe. So with that, I'll go ahead and transition to answering a question that I know usually comes up. This gets to the timing question, as well as some others, and traffic questions. That's road improvements in the works, starting with Beckman Road. So Beckman Road is planned, this is particularly between Stafford / Wilsonville and Canyon Creek Road, to be improved to urban standards, as well as a bridge to replace the dip, as well as a signalization of the intersection of Canyon Creek Road and Beckman Road, which will greatly help traffic in the area, as well as improve safety. The other thing to note is part of that, there's a sanitary sewer line that will serve the area that's going under the new Beckman Road that's being built. They are selecting, there's preliminary design and ideas been going on for some time, but they're going with a design build team for this, which selection of that is coming up here next month or so. And work is expected to begin to design the exact date of where there'll actually be movement of dirt. I don't have at this point. That'll be better once the team's on board. That will be better identified. But they're really in earnest work will start in late spring of this year, with completion of the project in 2024. I'll also note in relation to the sewer, we don't talk about sewer a lot, but sewer is a big deal when it comes to East and South. Currently there is, so this whole area drains to a sewer interceptor that's down along Beckman Creek down in the canyon. And that is not big enough to serve the whole area. So that it will be a major, like probably 5-year construction project to put a new larger pipe all the way down Beckman Creek from the area of Beckman Road to Memorial Park, where there's a pump station, which then pumps it back up the hill to Memorial Drive over to the treatment station, to the treatment plant in Old Town. So that's, so we're looking preliminary, what I've heard from the city engineers, looking at that being completed likely 2027. So that is certainly from a kind of a critical path timing, that a lot of development East and South cannot occur until that occurs. But that will also include, on top of that new pipeline a path that a mixed-use path that connects the Frog Pond area for bikes and pedestrians all the way down into Memorial Park. So just wanted, that's not on the slide, but just wanted to mention that as in terms of timing and when we'll actually see a lot of construction out here, that's a critical item. The other area where traffic often gets questions, understandably for this area, is the intersection of Ellingson Road, 65th and Stafford, which is a rural kind of non-traditional intersection that's seen increasing congestion over the years. This is expected to, so while the Beckman Road project, there'll be a period where the road will be closed to put in the new bridge. And during that period, there'll be a temporary traffic signal during that closure to relieve some of the traffic struggles at this area. That said, there's future intersection improvements that are high priority for Clackamas County. There are eyes on it. Precise funding or design or eventual solution, signal versus roundabout sort of things have not been made now, but certainly it's something that is on the radar and a high priority for the county. So really, in thinking about the improvements to this intersection, it's really a question of kind of some interim improvements to help it through until more expensive final improvements can be made. So with that, Joe, I will turn it over to you for a check-in.
Okay. I see folks have posted some questions. Thank you for that. Let's check in on what people are asking. The first one comes from Shreya. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. She writes, "Hi there. What are your plans to incorporate walkability, bikeability, and mixed zoning, avoiding another Villebois and the Portland Metro model to combat car-centric urban design?" Andrew, I see your note here that you wanted to start this answer. Go right ahead.
Well, my note was to that this is one we should definitely address, but I will try to answer it. As Dan mentioned, there's going to be some pretty significant new bikeways in the area, and it's a priority in the urban design for our team. We have Walker Macy on the team, who's a landscape architect, urban design firm, to make the most walkable, bikeable, and connected community that we can. So it's definitely a high priority for us, and we're in the very early stages of talking through some of the details of that.
I can add a little bit to that. If you go back and look at the vision statement and the guiding principles for Frog Pond area as a whole, it definitely references walkability and providing for bikes. The plan to date in Frog Pond West has done that through a combination of the street planning, fully connected blocks, and also the trail planning. And so that same approach will transfer over into the east and south neighborhoods. The other thing that will help promote these particular outcomes is the part of the project that we call the public realm planning, which is the streets and the parks and public spaces, looking at them as spaces that need to be used by the entire community and used as walkable spaces where you see your neighbor and everything. So that's a part of it. Dan, anything else you'd add on the urban design side?
No, I'd be interested. I know our planning commissioners have given a lot of thought to this from town center to Frog Pond to other areas. So interested if they have any thoughts.
Let's open it up to any of the planning commissioners on kind of looking ahead on urban design issues.
I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Ron Haberline, Planning Commissioner. I guess, one of the things that I would love Shreya to respond back to would be what the problems were with Villebois. From my perspective, as my time both on the Planning Commission and on the Development Review Board, and having been part of the process on individual lot developments and then just general planning, Villebois, in my mind, is a fairly good example of an area with walkability, bikeability. So I'd like to understand a little better from Shreya what really the problem is with Villebois in their opinion.
Okay, great. Anybody else thought on this particular question?
I will say a quick thing or two. The walkability and bikeability of the neighborhood has two aspects to it. One is internal, the other one is external. And you know, if you're trying to walk or bike to a shopping center, we have already talked about how it starts to stretch too far to the edge of the urban area. Unless we have a more substantial commercial center so that your shopping can be done inside the neighborhood as opposed to having to make your way to town center or, you know, that's the closest, I guess, shopping center if you're biking or walking. But one of the challenges I think that we also need to tangle with is the definition of mobility in the next 20 years is going to change. Already we are having around the country some pilot projects where on-demand transit is filling the last mile, as it's called in the planning circles, between the nearest transit and where your house is. Now we have already started a conversation with SMART, and we have talked about the need of transit service to this neighborhood. This in the future may end up opening up opportunities as we get to more on-demand kind of door-to-door services as the technology improves and as autonomous, for example, transit becomes more routine and more possible. So all of these aspects of mobility and accessibility are things that we are looking at, and we are sensitive to. The walking and biking, of course, is appropriate technology, and we want to make sure that those opportunities are there. But we're also going to need to look at the more long-term solutions that are on the horizon and are being actually piloted successfully around the country.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. The next two questions.
I would just like to add something too.
Oh, yeah.
That's our number one goal for city council is increased mobility for all in Wilsonville. So I think it's tantamount in everybody's mind, I think on the planning commission and city council, that we want to make sure that people can get around the city in whatever they're doing, whatever mode.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So Bill has asked a couple of related questions. I'll just read them together here. And Dan, maybe you can pick up on these. Will you talk about or define the proposed lot size of small, medium, and large lot zoning? And then also, will we be looking at different lot size options for small, medium, and large, as we did in Frog Pond West?
Yeah, and I think there's another one from down here that's similar is, you know, how the size of different units is related to lot size. So I would start that out by saying there's an exercise plan similar to what was done in Frog Pond West for those that were involved there, where kind of the sub area level planning, which is like blocks or multiple blocks, really looking at a more finite level of what's appropriate, what's the appropriate mix. So that same process is going to be followed to define, you know, what kind of the size of lots will be. You know, whether it's there'll be one point of discussion like will be whether that's a greater mix of lot sizes on a single block or a single area, or if it's fairly uniform. There's certainly, because lot size is important because it does drive a lot of the kind of the urban design or the scale of the structures, be it however many units are in the structure, really drives kind of that building envelope. So that is, and that will be more defined over the next few months in a sub-district planning exercise we plan. So certainly that is an important part of the conversation that we'll be having, urging you to be engaged in over the coming months.
Okay. I think there's also a middle housing part of this answer.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can open the code today that applies to Frog Pond West and look at the sub-district mapping that Dan mentioned. You see a property that's designated what's called R7 medium lot, and the minimum lot size there is 6,000 square feet. But it's a bit of a new day with the adoption of the middle housing rules, because specific middle housing types like townhouses have a different minimum lot size. In their case, they're 1,500 square feet. So it's important to kind of follow the footnotes in the code, I guess, is the part of the answer there. And of course, all of this will be looked at for its application in Frog Pond East and South. Any thoughts around the call on kind of lot size issues or answers to Bill's questions? You can come back to any of these topics, of course. Okay. Natasha has posed a question about affordability. What are your plans for affordability for single income families? So I'll toss that over to other staff members and then also invite panelists if they have perspectives on affordability. Kim or Dan or Georgia?
I'll defer to you first. I'm happy to jump in unless you're ready.
All right. Well, I think I can give some perspective from what the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan directed us to do as part of this project, which was to think about how we can incorporate some different strategies or targets for affordability into our master planning process. So part of the work that we're doing right now is looking at some different options for how we could go about doing that. One of the factors that we'll take into account are some of those data points we have around income affordability levels and, you know, what families can afford and how that translates into different unit types. And so that's a piece of what we're looking at in the unit mix. We don't know yet what the optimal approach will be. We're working on some different options, and that will be a topic of conversation at the Planning Commission's next work session on this project in February. But aside from that, and whatever targets we look at for defining affordability, we also know that units don't become affordable on their own. There are usually other strategies that a city would need to employ to help achieve that level of affordability. So there were some other strategies that were recommended in the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, whether or not it's like things looking into down payment assistance programs, or you know, looking at how we can employ different types of tax credits and or tax abatements to get different affordable housing types. Working with other nonprofits potentially on options to develop ownership models of affordable home ownership through looking at different ways of acquiring land. But one of the things we have to acknowledge is that the cost of land is often one of the bigger impediments to affordability and greenfield development. So it's something we're looking at. We don't have the exact answer quite at this point, but in the next couple of months, we're going to be talking through and refining some different strategies for how we can incorporate that into the master plan.
Thanks, Kim. And I would add that it is something that is a focus here. There is, Kim mentioned the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan and pointed out some specific actions to be considered as part of this plan, but in concert to that, and also as encouraged by Metro, the regional government, there's specific component of our planning process around housing costs, as well as making it affordable to different incomes, because there's one of the stats that Kim didn't mention is there's fewer dual income households, right? There's a lot of single households, a lot of for various reasons, and they often are looking for more affordable, smaller units. And so that memo will be published here in the next couple of weeks, providing kind of some different ideas and plans, and we'll continue to work through that kind of in an iterative process and make that important component of this plan. So all the answers we don't know yet, but we're certainly looking at all the options, and I think we have the right kind of specialists in the room to really hopefully move the needle on that. So interested, I know we've already talked about it some, and we'll be talking about a lot more with the commissioner, so interested in any of their thoughts on it.
Commissioners, any perspectives on affordability?
Any of the commissioners want to chime in on that?
Chair Mesbah, yeah, sure. I'll just reiterate the importance, from my perspective, having been part of the entire Frog Pond planning process. Frog Pond West was not developed with an eye toward affordability, and I would say that was part of the grand bargain with Frog Pond West is it was focused more on single family housing, with the expectation that Frog Pond East and South would be developed looking at those more affordable options and giving the additional housing types to help round out the Frog Pond neighborhood as a whole.
Yeah, let me weigh in on this too. When we talk about affordability, that question is different for different people. What's affordable for you may not be affordable for that next person. So while we're looking at this, I would say it's going to be very important that we weigh in on the whole affordability issue for here and in Wilsonville, of course, but also just looking at who are the people that we are talking about from the affordability standpoint. So I think it's a very important question. It's a very important issue that we're really going to have to look at in a really finite way. So I think it's probably one of the most important questions that we'll really need to address.
And as was mentioned in the long discussions we have had as part of the equitable housing strategy, it became clear that the kind of continuum of affordability requires a mixed approach. We need to have many solutions for many situations applied to that question. And we also, as the chart in the presentation earlier showed, the cost variable in the context of the different housing types. You get to condos and those kinds of units, it becomes more affordable. However, this neighborhood is going to be all new buildings. And so traditionally and typically brand new construction is less affordable than older construction that we used to call starter homes that people bought, and which were older housing stock. One of the things that has happened in most of these high demand housing areas is that all of those older housing stocks have been bought up and gentrified in most cases. So we need to approach this issue from all angles. And we even have talked about perhaps partnering with nonprofits so that more subsidies can be applied to housing in some of these situations where market rates aren't going to address the need for the lower cost housing that people may need. So this kind of is trying to shed a little bit more light on what Commissioner Woods was talking about, is affordable for who, and affordability is not a meaningful term until you get into the nitty-gritty of it, and then the solutions are very different from group to group to group. And we have talked about up and down that continuum, different solutions, and some of them are more doable in Wilsonville because of our size. Some of them are not. Some of them are more hopeful. We just are trying to be open to all the solutions we can use to address this issue.
Okay,
I
great questions.
think we also need to be aware of diversity of mix as well, right? Because we don't want one whole section to be all just single family and another section to be apartments or multifamily. So there's got to be a diversity within the neighborhood as well. So that's kind of the balance that we're going to have to pay close attention to.
Okay, great perspectives, everybody, and great questions. We're doing okay on time, so I'm just going to keep this moving forward and see if we can catch all of them here. Don Hanson has posed a couple of questions that are related. I'll read them together. First of all, will there be rental apartments? What density range? And then related, will affordable rental and for sale housing be emphasized? Is it acceptable to the city? Let's start with Dan, I guess, on what have we heard in terms of our scope of review for the project team, and then we can turn it over to planning commissioners on this question.
So without giving that directive an answer, maybe Don, in terms of the exact density or anything. I mean, obviously we don't have that answer fully yet. I think where the conversation is at this point is what should it be and why. We've talked about being data and needs driven. What needs have we identified that could be filled by different options, different types of housing. And certainly, you can't make a 6,000 square foot lot new construction affordable. It's just, the economics don't work out that way. So certainly some of that data may push towards multifamily, and whether that's small scale multifamily that's integrated in the neighborhood, like an 8-unit complex versus a 120-unit complex, that's discussions that we haven't made a decision on, frankly, and a discussion that still needs to happen. So whether or not it's acceptable to the city is an ongoing discussion. Certainly there's history of discussion around that. And I think it's, as we move forward with this discussion, something we've been discussing as a team is, we got to think about this outside the box of what exists and what makes sense going forward because this is different in different opportunities than historically have been in Wilsonville potentially. And so whether, how dispersed it is, what it looks like in terms of design, how it integrates with block by block level. And as Commissioner Carr talked about, making sure that it's not segregated, that it's more mixed at a block and, or multiple block level are all important concepts. So certainly I would say at this point, commissioners, you can have been here, but it's still under discussion. Certainly the area plan didn't really indicate a lot of that. And I think that's also part of the calculus here is being true to that, but also we have additional data obligations that, how do we keep kind of that look and feel and vision that's consistent across Frog Pond while integrating as many housing options that make sense as possible. And also making way for the market to be able to deliver a variety of housing options.
Commissioners, I see a few nodding heads. Anything you want to add to?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Woods here. I've been here, I've lived in the city for 25 years. And over the years, I've heard many of our residents mention about the rentals. We have too many. We don't need any more. So I would like to hear from our community on what their feelings are about this new area we're proposing here in Frog Pond, East and South. And what are your feelings about having additional rental houses and rental apartments overall? Do you feel it's needed? And if you do, what types? There are a number of different types of rental houses. I've seen a number of types in our neighboring cities. Some go up 5 stories, more so than out. So I really would like this question of the rentals, that's both houses and apartments. I'd like to hear from our community what they feel we should have. If they feel that is viable, if they feel that it's something is okay, then, I think that's something that then the Planning Commission can really discuss and understand.
Anything else from other commissioners on multifamily or rentals? Okay. All right, let's keep rolling. Let's see. Here is a question, I think it was from Aaron, back to the fun topic of the sewer project. How can those who live along both sides of the Beckman Creek green space be included in the process to express any concerns, ask questions, and give input, as the project will impact the backyards in some Wilsonville Meadows homeowners and owners along the west side? This is a little bit off-site to our Frog Pond process, but a good question. So staff, can you give maybe a brief answer and then follow up in more detail with Aaron offline? What are the participation opportunities?
So yeah, a project this scale, we always are working with the community and neighboring properties. So I mean, we're still a bit off from kicking off the specific design and community outreach there, but the design of the trail system and how that impacts surrounding, certainly there will be public involvement there as per course for that type of project. So yeah, I don't have exact timing when that will start, but yeah, I'd anticipate that it would certainly be opportunities to be involved, give input on the design.
Dan, is that something that's going to be on Let's Talk Wilsonville?
Yeah, it's when that time comes, I imagine it's certainly be on Let's Talk Wilsonville as well as through other channels.
Okay, Sparkle asked a question about the power lines. How is the city planning to deal with homeless squatters in public areas like under the power lines? I have had to evict 2 different campers and know of 1 more on another property. This might be a little bit more of a law enforcement deal, but Dan, anything you can add to how this gets handled?
Really through law enforcement, and I think so that's one answer, but also I think the design, the nature of how it could be used and encouraging uses we want is important as we do the park designs. Part of that is kind of general concept at this early stage, but then there gets into a lot more detail, including of the design in the trail areas as development actually occurs. So certainly there's design elements that can encourage or discourage certain activities, but then it's also there's the law enforcement. And certainly law enforcement has and will continue to deal with this type of situation.
Okay, a couple more to get through and then we'll move on to the next part of our agenda. Mike Morse with Polish Homes posed a question. Thank you for an informative session. 2 questions. And Dan, I think these are for you. Can you give high-level timeline from today to when land use applications can be submitted? And that's in East and South. Is the city working on additional processes that could work toward the efforts to bringing much needed homes to market faster? Start with the first one on the timeline, if you could.
I might, so there's, as often is with new growth areas, as I believe Mr. Morris is aware, there's kind of 2 components, right? So conceptually, you could, assuming as planned that this is all adopted by the end of 2022, you could submit land use applications early 2023. That said, there's also the infrastructure components. And so if there's inadequate infrastructure, that can delay a project. So certainly that's where that sewer interceptor in down the Beckman Creek corridor is important. Likely there's some capacity beyond what will be used up for Frog Pond West in the current infrastructure, but exactly what those numbers are, we don't know, and hopefully we'll get those answers as we get into our infrastructure planning later this year. Certainly process-wise, we're going to continue to keep focus on clear and objective standards and review processes. I think bringing stuff and really with an eye of costs. Certainly we're open to ideas and continuing conversations at all levels, including, at the legislature with our home builder partners about what's possible. I don't have anything really additional specific to add tonight, but we are, while there's certain interests that we need to protect and thinking long term, I think we always want to make sure we're thinking long term and understand the consequences of present actions when we're trying to get housing to market, but at the same time we don't want to do things needlessly that increase costs. So it's it's a constant effort to find that balance, and certainly we continue and will continue to engage with the development community as well as partners in other governments and other jurisdictions, kind of and the HBA and others to figure that out. So, Mike, I don't know what else I can say on that tonight, but I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks everybody for your attention so far. 2 more and then we'll move ahead. Elizabeth asks, is sustainability being implemented into the neighborhood designs, orienting homes to promote potential solar insulation, planting fruit trees and shrubs in common spaces, etc.? And just open that up to the team. I think the general answer is yes. And all of these types of strategies are available and on the table. I will note that the draft street plan for the east neighborhood has quite a bit of east-west oriented homes, partially for solar possibility, and also it just is the logical way to lay out and connect to Frog Pond Lane and other streets. Anything else on sustainability from the panel?
City Council goal number 7.
Okay. And then finally from Bill, what's the status of the plan designations that were adopted in the area plan? Are we starting over or is that as a base? So Dan, over to you on that one.
Yeah, and I invite others to add. So it is a base. It's certainly one of the inputs, an important input. It's not the only input, right? So, I mean, a plan from 2015 is subject to change. And, you know, this isn't unique to this. You know, certainly that even going back to like Billabong, the original concept plan, certainly not reflective of exactly what ended up in the master plan being built. You know, it's the iterative nature of it. And I think in this case, there are certainly factors. Being a non-regulatory document, when we ran into additional regulations or changes in policy, new things over the last 7 years since adoption, we didn't update it. So certainly there's components of the area plan that are outdated. For, you know, an obvious example is around middle housing. Is, you know, middle housing, while it's represented, is all kind of grouped in one area. And certainly that concept isn't allowed now, so that will need to be adjusted. And also there's room for, as appropriate, to introducing additional housing mix, having those conversations. So there's a base, I mean, like the road layout, things like that. You know, certainly a base we're starting with, but particularly to the housing mix, I think it's a starting point, but there's additional information both from the new state rules, the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, that are also inputs to add to that base that has not been updated since 2015. Okay. Joe, anything to add there? I'm interested in, or Kim, or commissioners.
I'll just maybe just add that we're looking at alternatives as the way. So there'll be choices that do work from the base and then look at other options. I am a little mindful of the time, so I'm going to move us ahead and we can talk about that question more as we get back to other panel discussions. So let's go to the next slide. And then I think one beyond this. Please, everybody, continue to ask questions through the Q&A, and we'll pick them up again here as we have time available at the end of the meeting. I want to go to some prepared questions now of the planning commissioners. And just to pick somebody, Andrew, this is a heads up that we'll go to you first. But let's go maybe 5,000 or 10,000 feet up, and you can work as specific as you would like. And first have questions about housing, then about commercial. What is one key opportunity and one key challenge that you see around housing for Frog Pond East and South Plan? And think of this in both the medium to short and the long term. So may need a minute to think about it, but Andrew, when you're ready, why don't you start us and then we'll go to the other panelists. Sure.
So key opportunity, I think, in that kind of medium to short term is just the chance to grow the city, but do it in a kind of a controlled fashion, right? We don't want to become part of urban sprawl. So this gives us an opportunity to plan a community that will provide affordable housing. I think that's one opportunity that we have, is to do it around the affordable housing. I think long term, you're looking at, you know, expanded value of the city, and the value of the city as it continues to increase allows us to afford and finance other things that are citywide infrastructure, et cetera. Short-term challenges, I think, are first of all, I think determining what affordability is, and I think also in the area of challenge, short-term and I think long-term is traffic and ability to get around. I think the 65th Ellingson Stafford intersection, I like how Dan said that non-traditional intersection. I think more people are going to use that North Wilsonville off ramp to get to Frog Pond East and South than maybe those that have been moving into Frog Pond West, just to prevent having to drive through downtown. So the challenge there is, how do we make that intersection work? Because it doesn't work now. So now that when you start adding more and more vehicles, how's that going to work? So I think that's one of the big challenges. I think that's going to be a short-term challenge, but I think it's going to be a long-term challenge as well, because how much more growth are we going to see in this area? Is it something where the Stafford Road is a 2-lane road? Is that really going to work long-term? So.
Okay, great. I think I'll just go down the list. Aaron, let's go to you. What would you offer as an opportunity and a challenge?
Yeah, I think from an opportunity standpoint, we can be very creative in looking at these solutions. I mean, in my opinion, we just about have a blank slate to really look at what are the housing varieties that we have, housing types, and really fitting those to the needs of not only our current residents and potential residents that want to move here, but when we think about the future, what does that mean? If we really look long-term, as we're saying here, and start to look at some studies to understand the population types, what is it that they want in their home, if you decide to have apartments, those types. So I think really, if we just look at what it is that we believe that people will want when they move into Frog Pond East and South, I think that's the opportunity to me to really look at how we can grow this area, but also meet the needs of people both now and in the future. When I think about the challenges, one of the big challenges, even though when we planned for this, I think we all realized the potential of parking being a challenge, specifically when we have depending on the types of homes, number of family members, people having a number of cars in the family. That's, I believe, going to be a challenge that we're going to have to really figure out how to address. Creative transportation. And what I mean by creative transportation, we have an excellent smart transportation organization that has been really good at providing solutions to the needs that we have. So one of the things that I think will be a challenge to SMART is looking at how they can help to solve some of the transportation needs that I anticipate we will have with the Frog Pond East and South locations. I also believe that, if we start to think about the future, and this is from, when I think about this as a challenge, having a crystal ball, of course, would be great to understand, okay, we believe that we will need these types of housing. Let's say we get feedback that people say we want apartments. So when we bring that kind of mix in, we have to also think about the affordability piece, which I also am concerned that that's going to be a major challenge for us. So I think when we look at these items here from a challenge standpoint, I think they will certainly, I'll say, challenge us to come up with some good solutions.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Continuing down, Jennifer, we haven't heard from you. Are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Hi. In thinking about the housing, I think one of the opportunities I'm most excited about is the introduction and the emphasis on middle housing. I think that the House bill and bringing that into, being a forcing function to make sure that middle housing is accomplished in this. I think that's a great opportunity. I think a lot of us are going to be surprised by those products that the builders are going to introduce and be excited about those. I think it'll be a great opportunity for people in entry-level housing to move up and people in single-family housing to downsize perhaps and really fill that gap. In terms of challenges, I think getting the community involved, making sure that we have a diverse community involvement, not just the surrounding neighborhood, while that is especially important, but I also want to make sure that we understand the diverse needs of the community and not just the neighborhood, and take that into consideration into the Frog Pond East and South planning.
Okay, great, thank you. Cameron, over to you.
I will start with the challenge, short-term and long-term. I think the challenge is to maintain flexibility. And the reason for that is that we continue to look at past trends and expect history to be a guide for the future. I think the future is going to be quick change and quick uncertainty in the process of change. And I'm not sure that we are used to that way of thinking in our planning. We are used to thinking long-term based on trends and casting things in concrete, expecting them to happen. I think we need to be nimble and very flexible, because some of the assumptions that we are making for what this vision in the future is going to look like are going to shift on us because people's priorities are going to shift. The changes are going to force people to make different decisions compared to what they're doing now. And we need to be able to accommodate that. And if we are too painted in a corner and unable to adapt, then we're going to have difficulty with the sustainability issue, with whether or not feasibility continues to be there, and whether or not this neighborhood will be a vibrant, ongoing kind of vibrant neighborhood. And some of those issues have been brought up in past conversations, whether it's too far on the edge, whether it's going to be isolated, making sure some of these modes of housing are not isolated, and so forth. So to expand the community and continue to create a cohesive community with the rest of Wilsonville. Some of the comments about hearing from the rest of Wilsonville, that's the importance of it, is that this needs to be seen as part of the overall community and embraced both ways. And so within those challenges are also opportunities. Our opportunities come from meeting our challenges. And to me, this is both short-term and long-term.
Okay, thank you. Ron, you are our last commenter on this one.
Okay. My key opportunity is really the ability to provide diverse housing types. Gives us an opportunity to really support the needs of the Wilsonville community as a whole in both the short, medium, and long term. Gives us an opportunity, as Ms. Willard said, was the opportunity for middle housing that we haven't seen before, and so I'm really excited about that opportunity. For me, the key challenge, or one of the key challenges, is finding a way to provide high quality, affordable housing throughout East and South. Not only that ability to have it distributed throughout the area, which is more challenging than concentrating it in one space, but making sure that it's a high quality product. That's going to require creative thinking, and it's going to require money. Affordable housing in any way is not cheap. It takes money to make it happen, and so we're going to have to be creative in how we can make it happen and think outside the box, but then also be willing to put city dollars in the pot to help support it.
Okay, thank you. I am mindful of the time here. We're getting close to 7:30. Let's go to our last question. And this one is, what is one key opportunity and one key challenge for potential neighborhood scale commercial center serving the Frog Pond area? Planning commissioners, let's try a little kind of quick hit opportunity and challenge response on this one. Jennifer, why don't you start us off? Opinions on commercial?
I think the opportunity to introduce commercial out in that area of town is a great opportunity. I think it's underserved commercially, but the challenge is the space is not as big as we think, and so how much commercial we can actually introduce that makes it viable, that's going to be the challenging part in my mind.
Okay, Cameron, your quick thought on commercial?
Oh, I have asked for creative answers to that questions ever since we started talking about this neighborhood. Buying habits are changing. People are getting stuff delivered to them. So I think the kind of commercial you're going to have are going to be community-centered commercial, like coffee shops and those kinds of things. And maybe running to get a carton of milk because you find yourself out of milk all of a sudden. I don't see traditional commercial in these neighborhoods working because I think our buying habits have changed from the mom and pop stores at the corner of the old days, even though we sentimentally think about it in those terms. So I don't know what's going to be possible. I hope whatever we end up commercially in this neighborhood is not going to be just for the neighborhood. I think it would be good for it to also generate back and forth kind of visitors and people wanting to enjoy the amenities in the neighborhood.
Okay, Ron, how about you?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, my key opportunity is really having an area for East Side residents to shop and gather without driving. I think that's a very important aspect that we can implement as part of this. My key challenge is unfortunately then around financial viability. The East Side residents are not a large enough population base on their own to sustain most of the types of current businesses that we would come to expect or want. And so how do you, as Chair Masbaugh identified, how do you bring in traffic to help sustain those businesses? That's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Aaron, your thoughts on neighborhood commercial?
Yeah, I think we have a big opportunity here with this community, with the kinds of ground floor type of shops that individuals want and need. I'm thinking more or less your corner store that the individuals living there would definitely want to need. And then the other thing too, let's not forget that we have close by communities that will not be far from this area that I would expect will want to, participate in shopping in these areas. Maybe there's some smaller restaurants. So I think the opportunity is, of course, to provide this for the community that's here, but I also think the surrounding community also will benefit from what we have there. I think the challenge is going to be putting all this together in a good package, in an affordable package that will ensure, or hopefully help to ensure, that those businesses that are there are viable, that they are, of course, making money, and also that they have the types of resources that people are going to want. So I think both with the opportunity and the challenge that we have before us, I believe that it's good.
Okay, and then finally, Andrew, your thoughts on commercial?
Yeah, I think the opportunities have pretty well been stated. The ability to have local community type resources available to residents close to them. I think the challenge that I view is I don't want to dilute the income potential of existing businesses. I don't want to strip away people on the east side that have been going downtown and instead transfer them over to the east side and then diminish the income of those businesses that already exist in the city. So.
Okay, great. Okay, we are at time here. Dan, if we could advance to the last slide and over to you for any final thoughts. There we go.
No, I just really appreciate everyone taking the time tonight. Vast majority have stuck with us throughout. It's been an interesting conversation. I appreciate the commissioners taking the time to be here and talk to the community about these important topics, and to encourage everyone to stay involved. We're still, this is an ongoing process, and there'll be a lot of conversations ongoing over the coming months. So keep track of us at Let's Talk Wilsonville, or follow the social media. We'll get the messages out, and look forward to meeting with you at additional meetings. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll just echo the thanks to the planning commissioners and all the panelists. I think we were up to 27 or so at one point, so that's a really nice turnout.
I would like to add a word here. The commission does a really good job discussing these things and it's at commission meetings and hearings and so forth. So we do a great deal of consulting amongst ourselves on these topics. What we are missing in that process of consulting with one another is the voice of the community. We need the community to participate in this consultation process to solve these issues so that we can all be having these discussions together. This is not a clique group that makes a decision. Its decision is going to be, in my own opinion, ill-informed if it's not informed by a really broad input from the community as a whole. So please speak up. Please let us know what your thoughts are.
Okay, thanks for that. And I think it's time to say the magic words. We are adjourned. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you soon.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you, Joe.